All right. Thank you for joining us on the Hunt the Lion podcast. Your host here, Kerry Alderson of Edgewater Christian Fellowship and of the Game Changers Ministry, our biblical leadership for men, where we encourage and equip men for leadership in the home, church, and community. And just an extreme honor to have our featured speaker at our next Game Changers, which is coming up here soon, and a man who's inspired millions, and I'm one of them, Mr. Lee Strobel. We appreciate you so much for joining us this morning.
Well, thanks, Kerry. Great to be with you. Looking forward to being in Oregon coming up in a few days, and going to be a great event.
Yeah, we thank you for putting us on the schedule, and
Sure.
we're excited. And you're coming from the Midwest or the mountain range?
I'll be coming from Denver.
Denver. There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We caught part of your interview on the Dove with Perry
Oh,
Atkinson.
yeah.
That was
Yeah.
great. So we
Yeah.
appreciate you taking time out to do
Sure.
that. So, boy, my guys that are a part of this ministry have a lot of questions. They're excited to hear from you. Your book, I have to say, outside of the Bible, your book, The Case for Faith and the Case for Christ, instrumental. I'm sure you get this all the time, but just instrumental in my faith in the late
Great.
90s, early 2000s. Just graduated from college, thought I knew everything. Massive skeptic, and the stuff that you shared really was inspiring and
Thanks.
encouraging it, and really just changed the way I saw things. But I have to say, this new book, Seeing the Supernatural,
Yeah.
our small group has been going through it. What inspired you to really dig into that? Because it's been encouraging, and it's really kind of shaped our men's ministry
Oh,
focus.
great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. That's very
Yeah.
encouraging.
What was the
Well,
inspiration there?
part of it was I saw a study that showed that 8 out of 10 Americans believe in something supernatural.
Mm.
Now, a lot of that is paranormal stuff. It's perhaps demonic stuff. It's new agey stuff. There's all kinds of things that people believe in. But I thought that's a great bridge to bring a biblical perspective to this issue. And hopefully to bring people into a relationship with Christ as a result. And the reason is we have a supernatural God. We have a supernatural faith. And the funny part is a lot of American Christians are a little bit embarrassed by the supernatural.
Mm.
It's like, oh, we want to be respectable. And so I don't mind that my neighbors know that I'm a Christian, I go to church and so forth, but I don't get into any of that weird stuff like angels and demons and stuff like that. That's kind of the weird stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we want to be accepted and be, respectable to our neighbors. And so many Christians don't delve into the supernatural realm that the Bible clearly describes. I mean, there are what, 200 or 300 verses about angels in the Bible. They really do exist.
Yeah.
Jesus was an exorcist. There's no question about that. Even skeptical scholars like Marcus Borg can see that historically speaking, there's no question that Jesus was a healer and an exorcist. So I think these issues are relevant to us, and I think they point toward the reality of God and the truth of the Christian faith, especially miracles, which, in my book, I don't deal with miracles stories that you kind of just hear or read on the internet. I'm dealing with things that have been researched by medical researchers, published in peer-reviewed medical journals that have been documented multiple times by people with no motive to deceive. And so I'm looking at real stuff. By the way, if I could add something really quick,
Of course.
we have a motion picture coming out on December the 15th in movie theaters around the country called The Case for Miracles. And I have a chapter in my book, Seeing the Supernatural, about miracles, but this movie is based on a whole book I did on that topic called The Case for Miracles. And I'm really excited about it. I just got some of the rough cuts of it. And I think people enjoy seeing the firsthand accounts of people whose stories are well documented and whose miraculous healings point toward a supernatural God.
Yeah. So what was the release date on that movie?
Yeah, December 15th. It's
Oh,
only in
wow.
movie theaters for 3 days.
Oh,
So
wow.
I
That's
hope people
incredible.
can come out on the 15th and
Ex-
bring a friend. Bring someone who's kind of spiritually curious.
Excited about that. Yeah, thank you. One of the things that I feel like holds, we talk about men leading biblically. I feel like one of the things that holds them back, we talk about, I just call it the vitamin C's. It's competence, confidence, compassion and courage.
Mm,
But I feel like the lack of competence
mm,
really causes people to shrink back. And especially
yeah,
when you start talking about the supernatural, I feel like a lot
yeah,
of us, we can't wrap our head around it. Like you said, we don't want to offend people or seem weird or like one of
yeah,
those fringe people. And
right.
so we just stay away from it.
Yeah, yeah,
And what I find fascinating is I would say 30 years ago, one of the big things was doubt. And you just tackle it head on with the case for faith and the case
yeah.
for Christ. And now we're here, we're talking about the supernatural, and you just tackle it head on. And so, what would you say to those people that have these questions that they kind of tend to push back a little bit and not really
Yeah.
research? Because you're the thing that I love about you so much is the diligence with which you respect
Oh, thanks.
or and research, I should say, respect the authorities on different topics, but the research that you put into things and the way you value research and the way you ask questions is
Yeah.
huge.
Well, it's okay to have questions as a Christian. And I think sometimes we think, oh, if I admit that to another Christian, they're going to think my faith is weak or I'm not as good of a Christian as you are. But I look at the story of, John the Baptist, who was thrown in prison and started to have questions about, is Jesus the one we've been waiting for? And he sent some friends to track Jesus down and ask him about it. And Jesus says, go back to John, tell him what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those with leprosy are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is preached to the poor. In other words, go back to John, tell about the evidence that you've seen that convinces you that I am the one I claim to be. And so, God's not surprised by our questions. It's not like he goes, oh my goodness, I can't believe he asked that.
Yeah.
And these days, it's a lot easier to do research than when I was an atheist, because I was an atheist back in the 70s and 80s. And this is before the internet, before a lot of books were written on this topic. So I'm in museums doing research. I'm doing interlibrary loans at libraries where it takes 3 months to find a book. I'm looking at microfilm and microfiche. I mean, today there's all kinds of great resources. So I think the key thing is when you have a doubt, when you have a question, I say first thing to do is crystallize it. What exactly is the question? What exactly is the doubt? Because once you can kind of put it in a sentence, then you can certainly find resources there to help you deal with the issue that at hand.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, we have three kids now in college. Our youngest
Yeah,
just got into college. I'm like, you guys have no idea what we had to go through in the library when we wanted to research a topic.
yeah,
You guys have everything at
that's
your
true.
disposal in an instant now. So that makes
Yeah.
your research and your efforts even more commendable. So again,
Well, for me, it's like I don't have to be the world's leading expert on all these topics. I go out and find the world's leading experts with PhDs from Cambridge and Oxford and Brandeis and major universities, and I just ask them the tough questions I had as a skeptic and can't see if they can provide reasonable answers. And
yeah,
and I interview skeptics. In my book, The Case for Miracles, the first three chapters are an interview with the number one skeptic in America, Michael Shermer, founder and editor of Skeptic Magazine. So I give him the space to raise his skeptical objections. And the rest of the book, I respond to that. And in The Case for Faith, I interview Charles Templeton, who was a number one skeptic in Canada
yeah,
and wrote a book called Farewell to God, My Reasons for Rejecting the Christian Faith. And we became friends. And I interview him in my book. I let him raise the tough questions. And then I spend the rest of the book responding to those questions. And I think giving reasonable answers from experts. By the way, I don't know if you've gotten this far in my book, Seeing the Supernatural, but Charles Templeton did come back to faith in Jesus before he died.
that's
And
amazing.
yeah, he did come back to faith and on his deathbed saw angels coming for him.
Oh, I've got goosebumps. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah. Isn't that great?
Well, and what an incredible testimony too for the believers out there who have friends that are struggling, seem
Yeah.
impossible that they will
Yes.
never come back or even come to the faith, uh, to just keep being a friend and to
Yes.
just keep having those conversations. And you
Yeah.
never know when that door is going to open for you.
I had a guy who contacted me. He said he became a Christian in one of the first Billy Graham rallies, I think back in the 1950s. And his brother was a brilliant lawyer in Los Angeles, a patent lawyer. And he tried to share his faith with him. His brother shut him down, didn't want to talk about it. And years later, he gave him a copy of my book, Case for Christ. His brother put it on the shelf, wouldn't read it. And he told me he prayed for his brother. He counted for 48 years and 348 days.
Wow.
48 years and 300, and on that final day, he did read my book, Case for Christ. He did come to faith. And at the time, he was ill and ended up dying shortly thereafter. But it just shows you persistence, and prayer. Sometimes that's all you can do. And yet, that's the best thing we can do.
Faithful, so
Yeah.
faithful. It reminds me of in James 5 when they talk about Elijah being a man just like us, and
Yeah.
he prayed and God answered his prayers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
That's
in
good.
all this research, decades of research and writing, are there a couple of interviews that stand out to you? Because I mean, you've interviewed some big experts in their
Yeah.
field of study.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, it's such an honor for me to travel the world and interview these brilliant, brilliant scholars. And a lot of them are so brilliant that they have trouble, as the saying goes, putting the cookies on the bottom shelf.
Yes,
In other
yes,
words, they're not great at communicating to everyday people
yes.
like me. And so some of my interviews, when I transcribe them, can be 40,000 words long. That's like a book.
Yeah.
And some of them go over a couple of days. I have to condense them for the book just because I want to keep hammering and get them to explain it in ways that I could understand so I can explain it to my readers. Because
Yes.
I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I want to understand what they're saying. And so, but I'll tell you the most dramatic moment I ever had in an interview was with Charles Templeton.
Mm.
Here he is, a guy who was Billy Graham's best friend, um, brilliant pastor of a church in Toronto, goes to a liberal seminary, loses his faith, becomes the number one agnostic or atheist in Canada. And I'm interviewing him, and he's elderly at the time, and he's in his penthouse in Toronto. And the interview lasted several hours. And so at one point toward the end of the interview, I said something like, well, if you don't believe Jesus is the Son of God, who was he? Who is he? And he said, oh, well, um, anything good I've learned from Jesus.
Mm.
He was the most moral, the greatest, most wonderful human being who ever lived. Jesus. And he begins to extol Jesus. And then his voice catches and he says, and if I may put it this way, I miss him. And he
Oh,
breaks
wow.
down crying.
Wow.
I,
Wow.
I just was stunned. I
Yeah.
was stunned. I thought,
Yeah.
what do I do right now? Am I a
Yeah.
writer or a pastor? What do I
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
And he caught his composure and he was embarrassed and he said, okay, enough of that. And he went
Wow.
on. In fact, I have the recording of that to this day.
Wow.
And that was just a dramatic moment that here's a guy who was known as the great skeptic of Canada, and
Yeah.
yet he weeps at the thought of how much he missed
Yeah.
and the years that he had his relationship with God, and
Yeah.
indeed did come back to faith ultimately. That was probably the most dramatic.
Yeah.
But golly, I've had so many great interviews, I think, with people like Gary Habermas.
He's a lot. I like a lot of the stuff that came from his interview.
Yeah, he's awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
he's the number one expert on the resurrection in the world. He's writing this, I don't know if you know about this, but this huge multi-volume defense of the resurrection that's going to be what 5 million words or something that responds to every conceivable objection to the resurrection. And the second volume just came out, but I think it's going to be 5 volumes or about that thick. I mean,
Noted
he's
that.
just brilliant. But it was interesting because his wife was dying at the time that I did the interview. And he said, and she did end up dying not too long after. And, he was very poignant in that interview and said, we have the hope of the resurrection,
Amen.
that if and when she passes, that this is not the last time I'll see her, that I'll be able to spend eternity with her in heaven. And that was a real comfort for him in the midst of the potential of losing his wife. Same thing happened with my interview with Douglas Groothuis, famous Christian philosopher. Actually, he went to the University of Oregon
Yeah.
to get his
All
PhD.
right. He's a
Yeah,
duck, huh?
and
My
became an
wife and my
atheist.
two boys are ducks. Well, my family's very involved in campus ministry, so
Oh, that's
that's good.
awesome.
Yeah.
But his wife was dying at the time I interviewed
Uh,
him, and he talked about how the importance of his faith had bolstered him in the midst of that, and
mm,
that was very moving to me because these aren't just brilliant scholars. These are people who have life situations and who have circumstances that need to be brought before the Lord. And so they're everyday people like us. They just happen to be brilliant researchers.
Yes, absolutely. So, a couple of questions that I want to close with. We're going to talk about what you see coming for families and for men,
Mm,
because that's the nature of the
yeah,
podcast, and some
yeah,
things that parents and dads and men need to be aware of. But
yeah.
before I get to that, this one of the pastors just asked me, I'm curious what your take is on what we've seen since the Charlie Kirk assassination.
Yeah.
The seeds were really, I feel like we were seeing some seeds of revival
Yes.
beginning. And
Yes.
then now in the last few weeks, it seems like that's become even more evident. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, the rap on Generation Z has been that they are the first post-Christian generation, that there
Yes.
are twice as many atheists in Generation Z as in my generation, but the percentage is still very low.
Yeah.
But we are seeing incredible signs of spiritual openness. The Bible sales have increased among young people. We see more guys going back to church. It's women who are right now, yeah, we're at risk at losing at some churches, but guys are coming to church at record numbers that are really causing eyebrows to raise. This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I have a good friend named Shane Pruitt, whose ministry is to travel the country and to speak to groups of college and high school students. And he said that in the last 3 years, he's seen more young people come to faith in Jesus Christ than in the previous 18 years of ministry combined.
Wow.
Something
That's
is
incredible.
going on.
Yeah.
And I see it. I spoke in Texas recently, and we had 105 people come to faith. I spoke in Las Vegas, had about 160 people come to faith. There's a real hunger out there, I think, right now. And
Incredible.
I think part of it is young people have been lied to so much in their lives. They can't trust AI.
Yes.
Who knows what's real and what's not. You
Yes.
have advertisements that seek to manipulate and sell things to them. The internet's full of stuff that is you can't trust
Yes.
90% of it.
Mhm.
And I think they're looking for something solid. How do I know? What can I base my life on? What can I
Yeah.
build my life on? What really can give me purpose beyond just breathing and eating and going to work every day and sleeping at night? There's got to be more to this. And you know what? There is.
Mhm.
And so I think there's a hunger right now among young people, especially, but just about everybody that they're looking for answers. And so I think that the moment is ripe. I mean, we see, I didn't know Charlie Kirk personally, but it was funny, not funny, but ironic a sense. On 10 days before he was assassinated, out of the blue, he sent out a tweet about me and said, "Yeah, Lee Strobel's a legend, and if you've got questions, he can really help." It was just a very
Wow.
kind thing for him to
Yeah.
do, and I asked my folks, my some of my people who I work with, to say, "Hey, reach out to Charlie. Let's have a conversation. Let's
Yes.
do his podcast," because he had asked me to do his podcast a few years earlier, and I wasn't able to do it.
Yeah.
So we never quite connected, but we have a lot of friends. Frank Turek, who's one of the main apologists who works with TPUSA, who was actually there, right there when Charlie was assassinated. And I believe he rode in the car to the hospital with the body. And so I know these people. And so the impact of that, I think, hit a lot of folks who didn't know personally Charlie, but his message of biblical fidelity
Yes.
and faithfulness to God is resonating.
Yeah.
So I'm encouraged by that. I really am.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. I was just talking with Frank Turek's people yesterday
Oh, good.
about getting him out here to Game Changers, and it looks
That'd
like
be
we have an
awesome.
open date. So
Oh,
I'm going
that's
to take
great.
that as confirmation from the Lord there that
Yes.
that's something that we need to proceed with. So,
Frank's a great guy. He's a
yeah.
former Air Force fighter pilot.
I did not
And
know that part. I knew he's
yes,
a former Catholic. I
yeah.
heard about that, but
Yeah,
yeah.
he's a
So
great guy, good friend of mine, going back several decades. I've
great.
known Frank, just a great guy.
Yeah.
I
So
hope he can come.
yeah,
That'd be
we're hoping
great.
that that works out as well. So, um, yeah, man, all of that insight, I appreciate. I was thinking as you were talking about Shane Pruitt, which I love his ministry too. It's
Yes,
such an incredible ministry that he's got as well.
yes.
Josh Bidwell, he played in the NFL for 12 years. He's the
Oh,
team
okay.
chaplain for the University of Oregon, and we had him at Game Changers, and
Oh, great.
he's become a good friend. He was telling us similar things. He said, in all of his years of ministry and playing, he's never seen a more godly coaching staff right now and
Wow.
players that are just hungry for the gospel.
Wow.
Most of the football team at the University of Oregon coming to the weekly Bible studies, the coaching staffs.
Wow.
Every week there's multiple baptisms, and so
That's
he's seeing
awesome.
that here locally. What you're echoing is happening nationally.
That
So
is so cool. That's
yeah,
great to hear.
inspiring. So as you tackle some of these things like the 80s and 90s, really kind of like you said, crystallizing the answers to some of these questions like the resurrection and can we
Yeah.
trust the authenticity of the Bible? And
Yeah.
now we're talking about the supernatural. Are there questions and things that are kind of starting to come up, or maybe that you would project out for parents, for dads, that they should be aware of,
Mm.
or really be able to have some solid understanding for their kids and maybe
Yeah.
perhaps for themselves as we move into this next season of life?
Yeah. Great question. Our kids and our grandkids, and I have grandkids in college age, so I'm an old man. I'm gonna be
You don't
74.
look it looking great.
Well, thanks. But our kids and our grandkids are going to face hostility and
Mm.
skepticism and challenges to their faith in a way that previous generations did not. I was interacting with a guy online. He said he was a grandfather, and he said, "My granddaughter is 6 years old. She's in kindergarten. She goes to a public school, and she was on the playground at recess, and the other kids were taunting her because she believes in God. Oh,
Wow.
you believe in fairy tales. You still believe in make believe. I mean, our kids and grandkids are going to be challenged in ways that previous generations weren't. So we have to prepare them, not just to know what we believe, but why we believe it. And one of the things I've done along this line, in fact, I think I have something right here. Let me see. Yeah, I do. Oh, wow. This is the first one I got. My desk is, you can't see how messy it is. So I'm
Yeah.
shocked that I actually have this. But I did a book for adults called Is God Real? And in that book, I look at what is the evidence, the best evidence we have today from science, for instance. We have discoveries just over the last 50 years that make belief in a divine creator more logical and rational today than any other time in history. And I look at philosophy. What are the arguments of philosophy that point toward God? And I look at history. I look at the resurrection and the life of Jesus. But then I was encouraged to do a book for teenagers. So I did this book. This is just now, it's not even out yet. It's coming out November 5th, I think, just early November, called Is God Real for Teens? And so I worked with an expert on communicating to young kids. And we wrote it so that young kids can get it. They can understand what is the evidence from the origin of the universe, from the fine tuning of the universe, from the information in DNA. What's the evidence from the resurrection and from Jesus being the unique Son of God? And so I would encourage guys, you know what? I'm not trying to sell this thing, but you know, I would suggest getting a couple of copies of this and going through it with your kids.
Yeah.
Read a chapter at a time independently and then sit down and talk about it. Um, I think that can really help equip kids so that when they do graduate from high school and they go off on their own, that they have a good solid foundation for why they believe what they believe.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate that. And I'm grateful that you spend so much time providing resources. Like we didn't talk about any of that stuff beforehand, but I'm super grateful that you have stuff like that available,
Oh, thanks.
especially in this time and age, and just the work that you put into all of it. I remember buying a 10 pack of the Case for Faith for $50. It was like
Yeah.
$5 a book. It was shrink wrapped. And I just
Yeah.
started taking them to my unbelieving friends and just
That's
giving
so
them to
great.
them and dropping them off. So, yeah, again, just super grateful for your work. Excited to get to meet you in person and have you at Game
Yeah.
Changers coming up here November 2nd, 6 p.m. at Edgewater. And your wife will be traveling with you, I
Yes.
understand. Good.
That's right.
Good for
She
you
always
guys.
goes with me. Now that we're empty nesters, I think our youngest child is 45 now, so we don't have kids at home.
Well,
So,
your work and your marriage and everything you're doing is inspiring. It
well,
really is.
thank
And
you.
so, again, we look forward to having you. We thank you for taking some time out, and we'll see you soon.
Glad to do it and very excited about coming back to Oregon. I love Oregon. Can I tell you a quick story about
Oh,
Oregon?
please do.
So I'm in fifth grade in Chicago, and we get an assignment. Every student had to write a huge report on a state. And so all the kids raised their hand. I want to write on Illinois because we lived in Illinois, or New York because was back then the biggest state, or California. And I raised my hand and said, I want to write it on Oregon. And everybody looked at me like, what? Where's that? And I did all of this research as a fifth grader into the state of Oregon. I wrote this huge report on Oregon, and I've grown to love the state ever since. And I study the Klamath River Basin and
That's right
Portland
here.
and all
Yes.
these things. And so I've been to Portland or to Oregon many times. I've not been to the Medford area in the past, so I'm looking forward to being there. But it's just such a beautiful place and so alive with nature
Yes.
that it's just very exciting to come back. So I'm really looking forward to being
Yeah,
there.
that's awesome. God put our state on your heart at a very young
He
age,
did.
as a
That's right.
child. So, all
Yep.
right, life
Yep.
is coming full circle here.
That's
So,
right.
all right. Well, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you. Safe
Thank
travels,
you.
and we'll
Thanks,
talk soon.
Carrie. God
Thank
bless
you.
you.